Hi folks, Jonathan from Spiritual Speakeasy here. I have no idea which episode this is, so that's very naughty of me to even say that. But I've got to say, perhaps completely more relevant is the fact that we've got an amazing guy here with us today. He's none other than Steve Young. I'm going to explain a little bit about Steve. Before I do, for anybody who's tuning into Spiritual Speakeasy for the first time, myself and my wife Anne run a wellbeing centre in Huddersfield in West Yorkshire, and we like to do these things every now and again. We come across really amazing, interesting people, and we like to have a chat with them about what they've found on their spiritual journeys in life. And I'm sure it's going to be a great chat that we're having today with this wonderful gentleman who's on your screen, will be sitting right next to me. He's actually in Scotland, so that's the magic of the internet, of course. And so yeah, we're going to put blurb in the end description, so website, web addresses, etc., etc. It will all be in there. But I just want to say that we were introduced, myself and Steve, by a lovely mutual friend of ours, a lady called Jane Roberts Frost. And Jane writes extensively about scientific and spiritual and our spiritual relationship, with nature and our ancient origins, which is very similar to what I do, and what Steve's going to talk about today will hopefully begin to kind of join some dots and tie things up and expand our minds. Yeah. And Jane lives in Huddersfield too, so she's kind of on the doorstep, not exactly on the doorstep, but we can always just chat and have a cup of coffee whenever the time is right. Now, I saw Steve firstly because I was recommended by Jane to see a video, and it was on the Alpha Vedic channel. And I kind of sat through that. I thought, wow, got to get in touch with this guy. And then lo and behold, as synchronicities do, Jane contacted me and said, Jonathan, you need to speak to this guy. So here we are today. I'm going to let Steve speak in a moment because I don't want to kind of steal his thunder in any way. But I just want to put across today the aim of this podcast video, whatever we want to call it. It's really to understand Steve's viewpoints on some amazing subjects which are dear to my heart. Science and alchemy and its relationship to spirituality. And this wonderful gentleman has written an amazing book, and I'm going to show you what that is. It's called A Fool's Wisdom: Science, Conspiracies, and the I tell you what, if I could only speak. Sacred. Sorry, Steve, I'm really kind of cocking up your book title here. The Secret Art of Alchemy. And I tell you what, that is absolutely amazing. I struggled with reading books for the last few years, and I picked this book up and it absolutely blew my mind. Couldn't put it down. I think I read it within a couple of days, and I thought, yeah, this is my kind of stuff. I'm now going to let Steve introduce himself, if that's all right with you, Steve. And you can perhaps give us a little bit of a resume about you and your journey, kind of, from where you've come from up to the point of writing the book. So I'd just like to introduce this lovely gentleman, Steve Young, once again.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, and thank you for having me on your show. It's a real pleasure. And thank you to Jane. Hi, Jane.
Hi, Jane. Yeah.
Jane, if you're watching, I'm sure she will be, who introduced us, and whom I've learned a great deal from as well, as you. And well, just to introduce myself then, the book is the result of really my life, of my studies in my life. So I started life as a sort of innocent young boy, as it were, and went to university with the best intentions of studying science, and particularly physics and mathematics. And then I got really into what they call the new physics, which is your quantum mechanics and your relativity and atoms and all that. really excited by all that, and so that's what I specialized in. And I got a master's degree from St Andrews University and a PhD from the University of Surrey. But then, after leaving academia at age 25, it was like walking off the edge of a cliff, really, and increasingly began to feel like the stuff I was learning was not really that useful in the world. That there wasn't really uh, anywhere where all this knowledge that I had gotten would be useful to people. So I spent a lot of years researching spiritual, coming from a sort of Western materialistic indoctrination. I was then starting to research like Eastern spiritual ideas and shamanism, and natural medicine, and things like this. And so that was my independent research after I left academia. And then, of course, that led me down a series of awakenings, where I realized that some of the really big ideas that I'd been indoctrinated with were in fact false, in my view, false worldviews. This became, I guess, more and more of an issue as life went on. And then we all went through, the terrible circumstances in 2020 and so on. And that it just seemed to reveal the whole system to me, like the whole system of scientific thought, modern scientific thought that so much of our assumptions are based upon. And so I really wanted to write a book which would rebuke a lot of this modern scientific thought, but also provide people with an introduction to alchemy, which was something I'd been researching also, for the last like 10, 15 years. And so I didn't mention that I was a musician. That was my main trade. As after I left university, I spent 5 years working in a corporation. The whole time I was just dreaming of being an independent artist, being my own boss and stuff. And so I started making music on my computer, and eventually I was able to do that as a business, and doing playing music around the world as well. So I did that full time for 10 years, from 2010 to 2020. And I was also researching and learning a lot, just being an independent researcher, and musician. And so 2020, I got to, what was I was like 42, age 42 when that happened. And for the last 4 years, it's changed a lot. A lot of perspectives have changed, and I just really wanted to capture it into a book where I could rebuke modern science, but also show people that there is an ancient science which works perfectly well and was common to all these ancient cultures, and it's called alchemy. And in fact, alchemy, explains everything in creation, like everything, without any need of any theories or any experts or anything like that. It's like a natural science. It's the science of creation. So yeah, that was really the purpose of the book was twofold. First of all, to rebuke the modern science, but also to introduce people to the ancient science. And so it's a book of two halves, if you like. So so that's where I'm at now. I don't do music as much as I used to. Occasionally do some gigs and that, but I'm now I've stepped into I guess a new career as an author, and it's only been out for a few months now, but I'm enjoying it so far. I've had a lot of great people write to me and made a lot of wonderful connections, such as yourself. And maybe just a final thought on that. It's different with music. When you're putting out music, it's all good, but when there's no words in it, it's like people can project anything they want onto you. They think anything they want about you. But when you write a book and you actually put your authentic truth in it, it's like the people connect with you because they really resonate with what you're saying and who you are. And so it's been quite interesting coming from making predominantly music to now writing all these words. The world responds very differently to books than it does music.
That's brilliant, Steve. And I think you've really nailed it when you came to talking about your objective for the book. And I realised that straight away, that we've got the two halves, part one and part two, if you like, and with the science stuff and the alchemy stuff. And I'll be honest with you, though, as much as I was loving the science stuff, I'm thinking, when is he going to start talking about alchemy in this book? You know, and
But yeah, so you could have been picking up on me, because the thing is, I just wanted to write about alchemy, but what I realized was I can't teach people about alchemy because they've been fully indoctrinated with a worldview that's opposed to alchemy, and every part
yeah,
of it, you know, like every one of these theories is actually directly opposed to something in alchemy, or like hiding something in alchemy. And so I
yeah,
thought I can't actually write about the alchemy without acknowledging this, you know, the modern
yeah,
science first, you know.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the
So,
things
but
that grab
I
me,
was keen. I was keen to get to the part two as well. When I'm
yeah,
writing part one, I'm like, come on, let's just get through this. Just like get through the dark woods so that you can get out and into the,
yeah.
you know, beautiful, yeah, valleys and so on. But yeah.
Definitely, no, that's brilliant. I was going to say that a couple of things that really grabbed my attention with the book was I love the title, "Science Conspiracies." It's those are two words that you don't generally see together anywhere these days. Yeah, because how can science be a conspiracy? You know, and all that kind of stuff. And the other thing was because of the work that we do. I'm not a tarot reader myself. My wife and a lovely lady, a friend of ours, Angie Wilson, takes care of that. But I am aware of it. I find it fascinating. It's a fascinating subject. But it was the fool's journey, yeah. And I know you explain that in the book about the fool's journey. And people's expectation of that is, well, why do you want to be a fool? You know, well, we're all a fool, and you know, we all begin as the fool, and then we begin to become the master as time goes on, if you like, or we're learning to become more adept. You know, so I found that really connective with the work that we do. Um, so one question I really wanted to ask you was this: what was there a definitive moment with all your studying, you know, into science, which must have been quite extensive? Was there a definitive moment when you kind of sat back and thought, "Hang on a minute, is this rubbish or what?" Yeah, did that kind of come as a road to Damascus moment?
Um, there wasn't like you know, it is, there's so many levels to it, you know, and I break down the different levels in the book, and I suppose it took quite a number of years to actually, you know, break down all the levels of it.
Mm,
Um, and that didn't really fully happen until I think in the last few years, you know, like seeing it all, how the physics connects, the physics and the chemistry, and like medicine and biology, you know, like all those subjects have this theoretical ideology which underpins them, and it's like a set of theories and so on. So yeah, it took a while to understand the arguments against all of the modern theories. And But I mean, I did have a funny moment when I spent some time out in Honduras working with a shaman there. And doing ayahuasca ceremonies and other types of Amazon medicines and all that. And it was a wonderful time, and I learned loads and really helped me to wake up in a lot of ways. But there was one time I was talking to him, and we were talking about the visions, you know, the visions you see in like a spiritual sort of state of consciousness, and I was like trying to explain that using quantum physics. You know, I was trying to like draw on my quantum physics, you know, education to sort of try and figure out what's actually happening in a spiritual experience. And you know, I was just saying all this stuff, and the shaman, he just looked at me, he put his hand on my shoulder, and he's like, "Steve, it's all bullshit." I was like really offended. Oh, like, this is my education. I'm an expert at, you know, all this and everything. But then it just sat with me, and it just kept, you know, the more I thought about it, I'm like, damn, you know, because he was coming from a purely naturalist, you know, point of view of like working with plant medicines and healing people and all that kind of stuff. And I'm talking about all these like abstract concepts and, you know, and yeah, it was just,
years
you
of
know, I look
research
back.
just down the pan, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, you know, I'd like to think quantum mechanics could be useful for something, but
Yeah.
then, you know, it hasn't been. And then when I started looking at like, well, what are the things that quantum mechanics is supposedly achieved? You know, what has been achieved with quantum mechanics? And then I found that the things that they say are the applications or the proofs of quantum mechanics are actually not.
Mm,
It's like a it's like they've retrofitted the explanation.
Mm.
You know, so like the TV, for example, the old school TVs, the cathode ray
Yeah,
tube,
yeah, yeah. Remember those?
say that that's an application of quantum mechanics, but it's not. It's just pure engineering. It's like they're actually, you don't need to know anything about quantum mechanics to invent the TV, but they've retroactively claimed
Yeah,
that quantum mechanics led to the discovery of the TV, but it didn't. It was pure engineering and nothing to do with quantum
yeah,
physicists. So I found this was the case with all of the things
yeah,
are supposedly applications of quantum mechanics. And then so if you're left with the conclusion that there is no, in 100 years, more than 100 years since the theory was conceived,
mm,
there's been no applications, nothing useful, nothing created, no benefit for mankind, and everyone's still arguing over about what the hell it all means. You're
yeah,
like, well, maybe it's time to say this doesn't work. It's not an accurate um, theory. It doesn't explain reality, and so
Would you
yeah.
say that kind of look at it as everything's already there, but the quantum mechanics kind of trying to make the cap fit? Does that make a bit more sense?
That's it. Yeah, yeah. They try to fit them. So they'll come up with an explanation for something, and then they teach it as if the application was born out of the theory. But
Yeah.
actually, the application was born out of human work and ingenuity,
Mm.
engineering and all that. And the theorists just sat about and came up with some fancy explanation for how it all might work.
Work. Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
yeah, so I couldn't find like really many examples of where like a theory was born and then actually led to an application that worked. I mean,
Mm.
other than things like music. So music is a good example of a theory that just has endless applications. The it's like music is applied to make stuff. Like with alchemy, it's applied to make things, and the theory and the practice are intimately tied together.
Yeah.
But with the theoretical physics, it sort of exists purely in the mental sphere and doesn't actually connect with the physical. Doesn't manifest as anything in physical reality.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's
and sorry, go on, Jonathan.
no, I was going to say, as things have been beamed into my brain, basically, that what is science? This might sound ridiculous as a statement, but what is science trying to achieve? What is the ultimate goal of science? Sometimes I think, are they trying to prove God or disprove God? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, they seem to want to disprove God, but then they'll tell you they're searching for the God particle. They're going to build the largest machine, the largest, most energy-hungry machine in the universe to search for the smallest, like, God particle and stuff,
Yeah.
which is pretty absurd. But
Yeah.
no, I mean, hiding God seems to have been, since the 17th century anyway, or at the very least, explaining things without God.
Mm.
Right, so like science wants to be able to explain everything without saying God made it,
Yeah.
without saying God made it that way, right? Which could be a cop out, right? It's like just for a scientist, that's a cop out. You can't say that God
Yeah.
made it that way, but so yeah, but you're like, okay, fair enough. It's a way of thinking without resorting to spiritual or religious ideas. I get that. It could be good for making stuff or whatever, but it completely rejects the soul and the spirit as well, right? It's not just God that's out of it, but it's also no human soul and no such thing as spirit.
Mm.
A purely materialistic construct that sees us as just bodies, which they see us as basically just a bunch of atoms, all kind of like hanging together and fumbling around, in space. And yeah, so it just it's very materialistic, very reductionist like worldview. And I always thought, oh, maybe one day they'll find proof of God, or one day they'll find proof of the human soul, or one day they'll find proof. It's like, even if they did, they would reject it, right? Because
Yeah.
they know it's a godless, soulless, spiritless creed. It's what it is.
But then they get excited about finding the Higgs boson. Yeah. And it's like, whoa, have we found God? And it's like, and then they play that down, and but yeah, it's well, as I constantly repeat in my blogs and stuff, and what I say to people is that that's my goal, is to bring science and spirituality together, you know. And I'm sure you're probably on the same pathway there, Steve, because they can work together. I believe that they can work together. I think they will achieve great things when that actually happens. I mean, even Nikola Tesla came up with some great quotes, you know, and said that the day that science begins to take you know, paranormal phenomena more seriously, it'll make more progress than it ever has done, you know. And I know you've met Jane, and Jane's on a similar track as well, similar pathway, and you know, what she brings through also, you know, correlates with the scientific stuff. I will talk about that in a little bit more detail as we go on. I have made some notes, by the way. If anybody's wondering why my finger's pointing down, it's because I'm scrolling down my iPad. I'm not going to hide that little secret from anybody. But there's so much information. I just want to kind of make sure that, you know, we can get that across, really. However, before we do that, I just want to go back to the book, really. And as we've said, you pointed out, Steve, that the book's in two parts. Part one, I would call it science. Part two, alchemy. But what I loved about the scientific part of that was it's quite bold statements, yeah, no hold barred statements, yeah, and what I call attention grabbing chapters, really. And there was one point I'm thinking, you're really going for it here, Steve. Good lad, you know. And because if you were to open this up on some kind of social media chat, you know, whatever, you get the old kind of people, what I call the armchair scientists coming out of the closet, you know, that make themselves sound like they know the answer to everything. And I think we've lost a little bit of the art of debate as well. I don't know if you feel the same. These days, everybody's got an opinion, but nobody's willing to debate the kind of grey areas in those opinions. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, really.
Yeah, it's a bit like I feel like social media is, well, firstly not social. It's more like an arena, right? It's like a sort of
Gladiatorial ring.
gladiator arena where, you know, ideas are like battling out and everyone's pitted against each other. It's
Yeah.
like, even though you could probably like get on fine in the physical world with this person, it's like the fact that you're online and you have a different opinion, it's like you're now enemies.
Exactly.
You're now enemies of each other.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's quite frustrating. And I think the thing with social media as well is like often it's just like one thought that's being debated, right? You post one thought or one line or a paragraph, and then you've got all this debate about it. But actually, the way science is done is like in books. You know, it's like I have long thoughts. Like I can't just post a short thought and then have 1,000 people like argue about it. It's like I had to, you know, it was a long thought. I had to write an entire book, like a thesis, basically. Otherwise, I'd be misrepresenting my position by just putting out short little tidbits. Do you know what I mean? It's like I have to like write the whole thing.
Yeah.
And you know, and in that sense as well, it's like if anyone's got a problem with it, well, why don't they write a book rebuking my book? Do you know what I mean? Like, if they can only say one comment, then it's not, you know, one comment to a book is nothing. But you know, it's like if you've got a problem with it, write a book rebuking my entire work, and that's, you know, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, I threw the spanner in the works on a page which is all about stone circles, actually. And somebody put up a post on this page stating it kind of as if it was historical fact, you know, and I dare to question that. And then this tirade of abuse came back because I post under my Jonathan Halstead medium and sound healer. Yeah. Well, that was all people could focus on then, was the fact that I'm a medium, so I must be an idiot. Yeah, a sound healer. I think one comment came back, what the hell's it? Well, actually, it wasn't hell. It began with F. What the F's a sound healer, you know? And you're thinking, suddenly you find yourself on trial, you know, for trying. And I think it's pointless trying to justify what you are. And I just said, look, if you got a problem with it, it's your problem. It's not my problem, you know. But it's kind of almost, how can I describe it? I suppose there's certain places where we can discuss these things, where we can release it. We all talk about our tribes coming together these days. People who are beginning to think the same language, really, or talk the same language, should I say? Yeah. Like yourself, myself, Jane, and others all over the world now, all coming together, talking about this stuff, talking about the ancient stuff, and you gotta come to a point where I think we ask ourselves, don't we, Steve? Were these ancients stupid, or did they have something way beyond our kind of intellectual or physical or spiritual concept or construct? And the more you delve into it, the more that you think, oh my giddy aunt, these people really did know what they were talking about, And the Mayans, I was amazed by the Mayans, crack astronomers, crack mathematicians, and I think we've lost a lot of that ability over time. And I know your science part of the book touches on that. And but anyway, yes, we have lost something, but I think we're just on the cusp of beginning to get it all back. Yeah, what I call the remembering. So we're not really ever discovering anything. We're actually remembering our deep ancient ancestry, and that wisdom starting to come back. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, 100%. And like alchemy is is never credited to any human being, whereas
Yeah.
all modern science is. It's like Darwin's this and Einstein's that and Hawking's this and Pasteur and Copernicus and Kepler and stuff. What that means is it was born in their mind.
Yeah.
It came from their mind. That's why you have to say their name whenever you talk about it. You can't talk about gravity without talking about Newton, Einstein, or Hawking. It's like, but alchemy, yeah, you can talk about alchemists, people who practiced alchemists, but no alchemist ever claimed credit for alchemy. It's of the gods. It's of nature. It is the science of nature itself. It's the science with which creation was made. It's happening all the time. It's like it wasn't made by us. It's like it's happening inside of us. It's happening around us. And we are always participating in alchemy, but if we haven't learned the ancient wisdom, then we can't participate in it consciously. We participate in it unconsciously, day to day. I mean, digestion of food, that's an alchemical process. There's always alchemy happening in our bodies and everything, right? But if you don't actually know the ancient science, then you can't consciously participate in it.
Absolutely. And particularly when we go down the big pharma route, and it's all kind of, to me, about being able to trademark what creation provided. Yeah, as long as we can stick a trademark on it, we can start to make some money out of it. Yeah, so it's taking the elements of nature and, in a way, in a sort of way, an alchemical process, mixing it all together and then stamping a corporate trademark on it. Yeah. And so in one respect, I suppose, these corporations are doing alchemy, although they probably won't admit it. So they've produced a trademark that, this new drug, this new wonder drug, that probably some of the plants out there, you can go down the garden path and find these healing plants. But yeah, as long as it's got a trademark on, come on, boys.
Well, yeah. So what a lot of these corporations and that are doing, the ones that are like meddling with nature, I mean, that would be like anti-alchemy. And the reason is because they're actually making things worse. Alchemy is about making things better. All the stages of alchemy are different stages of purification. So you're basically purifying things and making them stronger and better. And like gold, right? So gold is being the symbol of alchemy, like lead into gold. Because gold is incorruptible, it can't be tarnished. It's got this wonderful quality, and so that's the idea with alchemy, is that you're taking some raw material and you're making it into something purer and better and with more function and utility than what you started with. But what these companies do is they take stuff and they defile it. they take nature, they defile it, they add toxic additives in, they add things for, capitalist reasons and all that, and they end up making a product which is what is a poor imitation of what nature provides,
mm,
or is just completely defiled and polluted with synthetic bits and bobs and all that kind of thing. When if we'd actually just mimicked nature, if we'd imitated nature instead of messing with nature,
mm,
then you'd be able to create a much better thing. Um, so yeah, I see like it's kind of like an anti-alchemy what
yeah,
a lot of these things do, or you know, similar like with the a lot like Hollywood and the music industry and stuff like that. The way they'll
yeah,
take like a child star who's full of promise and potential, and then they'll just completely ruin them,
trash
and,
it.
and so
Yeah,
they're like this broken adult. That's
yeah,
like anti-alchemy. You're
yeah,
taking
yeah,
something good from nature and ruining it.
yeah.
Um,
No, I totally agree on that, and you know, it's it's the soul, isn't it? And I know you touch on this, and we'll hopefully talk about it later on when we get to the alchemist section of what I'd like to talk about and ask you today is taking the soul. And you mentioned it right at the beginning today, Steve, about the materialistic aspect of everything, and that can apply to everything, including politics, by the way. A lot of this perfectly describes politics, meddling with things and making a right mess of it. And it doesn't matter, without getting political, because I'm not a political person at all, but you just watch it all happening and you think nobody's ever going to solve the problems. And it's a bit like science in one respect, because I always say about science is that you try to measure something that's not always physical with physical means, you
mm,
know,
mm.
and it's never going to happen, and I always say as well that we try too hard. And I know you've mentioned about some of the mind blowing equations that science has produced, but yet, you know what? It's so simple.
Yeah,
Everything's just so simple. We make it complicated.
yeah.
So I don't know what your feelings are on that, Steve.
Yeah, well, I mean, with the theories, like the theories, if you think they're in your sort of in your mind and in your head, they sort of get between your senses and yourself, because so you're looking, you've got what you're seeing, the nature, the world, and then you're taking that in, and then you're like filtering it through these theoretical ideas that you've been taught to use to make sense of the world,
Mm,
and it just really clutters things up. So when you listen to someone who's like highly indoctrinated, you know, they're using like words and terms that are confusing or don't quite relate to reality or rely on concepts that are um yeah, fictional or just hypothetical and stuff like this. It's very, very heady, and it's not that we know intelligence is important, but there seems to be this something that's happened where it's like inverted now, that the academia is like turned in on itself, and it's like a limited hangout, or like an enclave where people can just say anything, but it never affects the outside world,
mm,
because
mm.
they're dealing purely in the mental, without any real testing or applications of the ideas.
Yeah,
um, and yeah, so I think when you understand the criticisms against these theories, it helps you to then clear your mind so you can actually just see what your senses are showing you,
mm,
instead of interpreting it through these theoretical models.
yeah. And a term I came across only just in the last 12 months, 18 months or so was the replication crisis. And it's
Mm,
even on that well known source of truth, Wikipedia, is the replication
yeah.
crisis. And and that really started to open my eyes up a little bit about, kind of bought and paid for science. I know you've touched on that as well in the book too.
Yeah, that's 100% real thing. And actually, one thing I didn't mention in the book, I probably should have in retrospect, was that during my PhD, I was like, my first task was to replicate a paper.
Mm,
And it wasn't that big of a paper. It was like 4 pages or something, but it was a lot in there, and it was like theoretical nuclear physics. So I was trying and trying and trying, but just could not do it. I had to, basically rederive all the equations which they derived in this paper, and then write a computer program to solve the equations and produce the same graph that they got. But these equations are enormous, like you wouldn't believe it, and it's like the computer program sometimes would take days and days to actually like finish the calculations and stuff. So
Mm.
if I'd made one mistake, then I'd have to go back and run it again. All the debugging, it was awful. But
A bit
I was
like a
never
syntax
able
error
to
in
I
the
was
old.
never able to reproduce the result. And
Yeah, sorry.
eventually it was in my third year at this point, and it was supposed that was going to be my task for the first year. I'm still in the third year. I still haven't managed to do the first task. I'm like, I just can't do it. And my senior professor, who was really wise and nice guy and smart, he sat down once and he showed me a mathematical proof. I won't go into it too much, but basically we were able to show mathematically that the result in the paper was wrong.
Mm.
Right. That's why we weren't able to reproduce the result, because it was in fact wrong. It was an error.
Yeah.
And we were able to show that thanks to my supervisor who came up with it. We were able to show that quite elegantly, prove that the original paper was wrong.
Yeah.
I met the author and everything and shook his hand, and it was really awkward. But
Yeah.
so I proved someone wrong in my PhD,
Mm.
right? And that's just it. But how much effort does it take to replicate a
Yeah.
scientific paper? It's a huge amount of effort, and
Yeah.
people don't have the time or the money, and like peer review certainly doesn't. Peer review doesn't mean it's been replicated, right? Peer
Yeah.
review means it's been read. Someone's read it and they've been like, yeah, that's that's all right, but they haven't tried to reproduce it, because that could take years and years and be very costly.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
that's one of
most
the
science has never been replicated.
that's one of the arguments that like I said, the armchair scientists keep going back with. Where's the peer reviewed papers on this? And where's the source material for this? And I've just realised, for anybody who doesn't know what the replication crisis is, it's basically trying to prove or reconstruct so-called experiments that have been taken as fact, really, that we just accept it. Oh, well, it must be right then, because because it's here, in right, as you've said, Steve, you've gone through that.
Yeah.
And or there's a result which is expected of somebody who's paying for the research. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which is influenced by the funding of, say, that department or whatever it might be, is dependent on reaching this certain result.
Yeah.
And so if that helps to clarify what we're talking about here. But yeah, I mean, the peer reviewed stuff, it's it's like you say, it's just people reading things and perhaps agreeing. I don't know, because I'm not a scientist.
I used to call it a sanity check, right? It's just they're just looking at it to make sure it's sane, or that it basically fits with established, protocols and ideas of science, and it's not too out there. But it's effectively a kind of censorship, to keep it all interior to academia, because most of these papers are not going to be comprehensible by anyone outside of the academic. But like what I'm saying, even inside academia, people don't have the time to comprehend a scientific paper beginning to end, because it's years and years of work, often years of work on behalf of the scientists, and they've condensed it down into this like super dense paper and all this like technical jargon and language, and it's not even easy for the experts to read through that stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is just so out there, like literally the titles, the titles of the papers are just like unbelievable. It's complete gobbledygook. You think, who could possibly read this and enjoy it, or get something out of it? It's just.
And do you think that part of that, one of its aims is to confuse people? Would you say that?
Yeah. I think there is actually, I mean, I want to think everyone has got the best will in the world and, good intentions and all that, but I think there's definitely a programming and conditioning aspect to it all as well. I was just talking, I just made a post about this today. I was with some friends at the weekend and was reminded of a game they used to make us play at school. Now you'll maybe remember this as well. Certainly, I think they do it all across the country, and they still do it today with the children. It's called heads down, thumbs up.
All right. Okay. No,
They ever,
I've
they ever
not had
make
the
you do
pleasure of
that?
playing that one. No, I'm
So
knocking on a bit, you see, Steve, now. So,
yeah, yeah, maybe it started. Yeah, I'm not sure when they started it, but they seem to do it all over the country. So
yeah,
you got to put your thumbs up and your head down on the desk, right?
yeah,
And then the teacher comes around and puts your thumbs down.
right.
And, I was thinking, gosh, the symbolism of that, right? The programming. And it's like,
Yeah,
because heads down means don't look at the truth,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
thumbs up means confirm everything's okay, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
and then only the teacher can put your thumbs down, so that means it's only not okay if the
Mm,
teacher says it's not okay, right? So
okay. Yeah,
and that is like basically the predominant attitude of people in this country. It seems it's like don't look at the truth,
yeah,
pretend everything's okay.
yeah.
um
That's it.
and yeah, they still do that to kids today, and I just wonder, yeah, so you see something like that, it's just a harmless little game,
Eyes
heads down,
wide
thumbs
shut
up,
scenario.
harmless little game. Now what about
Yeah,
physics? Is like, is that all harmless as well? It's just
yeah, yeah,
all supposed to be harmless and interesting, but actually it conditions you into a certain worldview or like philosophy
yeah,
that is ultimately materialistic, godless, soulless, spiritless, and all that.
yeah. Well, I'll let you into a little secret. And I was never very good at maths at school. It was always my Achilles heel, really, maths. And I wanted to do physics because I love the idea of physics. And I thought, wow, I've been watching like Carl Sagan documentaries and all kinds of things, and I'm thinking, yeah, I want to do that. And so on the very first day that I attended physics class at school, I would be about 14. And a teacher came in, promptly removed me from the class, muttering that my maths wasn't good enough to do physics. Yeah, kind of, got me by the scruff of the neck and dragged me out of the class. And I was well disappointed, I'll be honest with you. But when I look back, you see, because the more you understand about life path and how things are related and things are meant to happen, and I thought, yeah, perhaps I might have gone down a different route that day if that had not happened. You know what I mean? And I only ended up in the science subjects because I got a really good mark in biology, and I love biology, and that's probably why I got a really good mark in it. But when I went on to do A level biology and we did genetics, oh my giddy aunt, was it boring? And
Oh, genetics,
And
yeah.
all we learned about was Gregor Mendel and his Drosophila fruit flies. And I thought, this is not the genetics that I want to be learning about.
Yeah.
So it kind of dulled the mind, really, more than inspired.
Mhm.
It was more about dulling the mind. So I don't know,
Yeah,
obviously,
that's it. It's like you
further.
wanted to learn about life. If you're going into
Yeah,
biology, you want to learn about life, and it's like, but then the stuff they're actually teaching you about is this super like low level, all like codes and numbers and names of
mm,
molecules and genes and all this kind of stuff. It's like it doesn't feel like you're learning about life. It's just
yeah,
this like technical framework and everything. But and it's like that with chemistry as well. Like chemistry, obviously, they tell you chemistry came from alchemy. I mean, I
mm,
remember learning that at school, but they tell you that's the only good that came from alchemy, right? Alchemists were completely misguided, but they did do one good thing: they invented chemistry, right?
fantastic.
But here's the thing: alchemists didn't even talk about atoms. Like they got no concern for atoms and molecules and bonds, right? But
Mm,
when you go to chemistry class, that's all you learn about:
mm,
atoms, molecules, and bonds. All right, you might do some actual practical chemistry, mixing liquids and so on,
mm,
but all the study work is atoms, molecules, and bonds. I mean, I remember like having to remember like the angles between the bonds on the atoms and all this kind of stuff, like
yeah.
just like insane. And I'd actually, all the atomic stuff like disconnects chemistry from its alchemical roots,
Mm,
which is ultimately it's all about mixing and transmutation of fire, earth, air, and water.
yeah.
Chemists work with liquids, they work with solids, they work with gases, and they work with fire.
Mm,
Um, they don't work with atoms, they don't work with molecules, and they don't work with bonds. Like this is just like a mental framework that has been installed
yeah.
within us, and it just complicates the whole subject and
Mm,
makes it far more boring and just less applicable in your own life,
yeah,
um
yeah.
yeah.
I understand from the aspect of wanting to know how something works, and that's kind of something that's always interested me in life, is wanting to know how things work. But we're going back to that simplicity thing, like you say, about, you talked about the angles, and all this, and it's like, well, if you take this, and this, and it produces this, and it works, do we really need to know about that? And it's a bit like when I did music at school, and obviously you're well into music. I love music, and I wanted to play guitar when I was a kid, so I did guitar lessons at school. And for about 6 weeks, all we did was play Three Blind Mice on one string on a guitar. And, and I'm thinking, this is, I mean, this was in the 70s, by the way. This is when you had mega bands, you know what I mean? And you're thinking, this is not what I see on Top of the Pops. Come on, you know? And so I actually ended up teaching myself. I got a little, it was a back of a record cover, actually, and it showed you all the basic chords. Yeah, and I taught myself the basic chords, and I started to learn how to really play a guitar,
Yeah.
So yeah, and it was very simple. I'm not saying simple, yeah. Obviously, there's a lot of practice involved in that, but the actual, rather than learning the theory, because I think we go wrong there a lot in education. It's like languages. I spent 6 years doing French at school, and I'm still not particularly fluent or anywhere near fluent in speaking it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
did 12 months with German, and I can speak more German than I can French. And I have a son who's he's studying linguistics. He lives in Vienna. He teaches English now, but it's fascinating about the construct of language.
Yeah.
Um, but it's like the basis of it is, you speak it, you hear it, you speak it, but yet when you're studying it, you're breaking it down into this participle, that, etc. And you don't kind of speak language, do you, by thinking, well, I must talk in the past participle or whatever it might be. You just do it, don't you?
Yeah, yeah. Linguistics is very technical as well, isn't it? Very reductionist, but it's super interesting, because it is applicable. It does.
Yeah,
Obviously, there's infinite, applications of language.
yeah, yeah,
You are learning in some ways with these theories, like in theoretical physics and stuff. You're learning a new language because it's all, there's new things, things that aren't in your life, like electrons and protons and neutrons, for example. Those are the first three things you learn about. Like, no one's, they don't tell you, no one's ever seen one, no one's ever held one in their hand. No, you know what I mean? It's just like, where did these things come from? They
yeah,
were made up, made up in someone's head, and we were taught them, and like all the education revolves around electrons, protons, and neutrons. But then you come into life, and you're like, well, where's all the electrons, protons, and neutrons? Has
yeah,
anyone seen them? Anyone working with them? And in my view, the answer is no. It's just a
yeah.
model. Um,
I think most people would expect to there be some special microscope somewhere where you can actually see an atom,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know. So it's
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I definitely debunk anything like that that claims to be showing atoms and stuff. I mean, there's obviously structure on the small scale with matter,
mm,
um, but yeah, the idea of the atom, this sort of indivisible, 100% solid, pure. Well, originally it was meant to be 100% solid, pure matter, like
mm,
indivisible.
mm,
Like, oh, we split the atom,
mm,
so now it's no longer indivisible. It's like this little collection of particles all spinning and wobbling around each other in some fuzzy thing, like merging out in and out of reality. It's just got more and more. In the beginning, the atom was just a ball of stuff. That was it, just a tiny little ball of stuff. And
yeah,
now it's like this super complex, theoretical marvel. And I don't even think hardly anyone even knows what they're supposed to be anymore. It's
mm,
like, why are we even still talking about atoms?
yeah.
Uh, but
I know you cover that in your chapter. Is it the atomic age psyop
yeah, yeah,
chapter? and it's fascinating. The thing is, I think Steve just got to kind of bear in mind that we are governed to physical time. There's lots that I'd love to open up on that with you. I don't know whether you could or not, but so what's the alternative to atoms then? What would you class as, for all those people who've studied atoms, and I've studied atoms at school, and etc. And what's the alternative to that, would you say?
Well, it is ether. So, ether was or is the primary substance of creation, if you like, the substance of the space itself that, that everything manifests from. And it's been very well defined and understood for a long time before atomic theory was sort of put in its place. So they're actually like diametrically opposed worldviews, like the atomism and the ether, because ether, if you, you can think of ether like water or air. It's all connected. Like in a body of water, every bit of water is connected to every other bit of water. It's all a single, body of water.
Mm.
And in the same way, in a universe made of ether, the whole universe is connected by the ether. But in an atomic universe, everything is disconnected because everything is just single units of matter separated in space from other units of matter. So it's fundamentally a worldview in which everything is separate and unconnected, as opposed to a worldview in which everything is connected and together as one. And so, yeah, that's kind of the main, with the atomism, that's the main thing that it's hiding, is it's hiding knowledge of ether, but it's also hiding knowledge of transmutation and free energy. So these are two things that you get taught when you go to physics class. Transmutation of metals is not possible. There's no such thing as free energy, right? They're like, and that's just how it is. But well, like long ago, like transmutation of metal was commonly understood. Like like metallurgists are not theorists. They don't they don't sit around like coming up with theories about metals. They're literally making the metals in with the fire and the metal, melting it down, mixing it, blending it, making all these different metals with different properties for different applications. So transmutation of metal is perfectly real, even though physics claims that it isn't. And then free energy. There's no such thing as free energy, but in fact, the sun and the air and the water and all that are always moving and providing energy that can be harnessed. That's never ever going to run out. It's literally free and unlimited and totally abundant. But they hide that as well with the atomic theory as well. It's like, oh no, it's not. The energy is locked up in the center of the atom, and it has to be unlocked by huge like processes that are too expensive for normal people to handle, or require big machines and all this kind of thing. And it's just like, no, it's like energy is just infinitely abundant all around us all the time. Is never going to run out.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, so the atomic theory hides all of that and other things as well.
I think of it this way as well. Free energy, the human body. Yeah, it's like, how the heck do we keep going? We don't have to plug ourselves in as such, do we? To a physical plug socket.
Yeah.
The plants grow for free, yeah, out there. The food grows for free, yeah. And unless we're back to trademarking again with all these horrible products that they put in processed foods these days.
Yeah.
And the animals and the insects and all life on this planet, the earth sustains that life, and then we convert that into energy, yeah. Which obviously has got to be an alchemical process, and therefore we keep going. And if we don't do that, then our body becomes depleted of energy. You see, it's just a natural, common sense thing, isn't it? And I think that's what I love about the alchemical side of things, is it's actually common sense,
Yeah.
And I know you mentioned about ether, and I was really interested in that, because was it you or somebody else I've been reading recently that said that ether was in the periodic table at one time and it got removed, or have I read that somewhere?
I saw that come up recently. I can't verify that or not, to be honest, but yeah, it's certainly occulting ether is a big part of modern science, and
mm,
yeah, there's many different ways they do it, but it has essentially replaced the ether view of the cosmos with the atomic view of the cosmos, and that's like at the most fundamental level of science. It's like the actual substance of the
mm,
universe has been redefined as being atoms,
yeah,
uh, and so this is how it becomes like a religious thing, because the atom has replaced Adam. The first man is
yeah,
now an atom, and God, right, the creator of everything, the creator of
mm,
the universe. So it's like everything is just now created by atoms,
mm,
um, made from atoms and created by atoms.
yeah,
So it's like you took Atom to replace God, and Adam, the first man, or whatever. So
yeah,
um, it's become like then a sort of scientism, as we call it, it's a religion.
yeah,
Uh, it's like, because even though they dismiss God, they've just put something else in his place.
yes,
You know.
yeah. And like you say, when we talk about the replication crisis and all these things that we can't reproduce, at that point, you're reading it in your textbooks and everything, and in your theses and whatever. It actually becomes like a religion or a faith, you
Mm,
know,
yeah.
because you're believing in something that you've not actually experienced for yourself.
Yeah.
And I get this a lot, like I said, going back to the old armchair scientists is, where's your proof, and you can't prove that, etc., etc. Well, I've actually witnessed it with my own eyes. Yeah, I witnessed it with my own feelings and my experience. I can, and one guy puts on it to me, says, "Well, if you're a medium, you've got to have this many controls and that to and completely test the theory, and come up with the same results." I said, "I've been doing it for 30 years, mate. Yeah." Um, where do
Yeah,
you
he like
start?
wants you to prove it. Yeah, I know.
And it's like, yeah, and it just goes on and on. It's a road to nowhere, of course. But and something else just popped into my mind as well, Steve. Science, dark matter's the big thing now, isn't it? And you know, do you think that dark matter is actually the ether?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's almost like they've arrived at an ether-like hypothesis
Yeah.
by necessity, because the gravity and everything, it just leads to all these problems that so that they've ended up having to like hypothesize an ether-like substance called
Mm,
dark matter
mm,
in order to make their whole view of the world like actually hang together and make some kind of sense. But I mean, it still doesn't make any sense if you ask me. But yeah, that would essentially be it, because we can't see it. So it's dark in the sense that we can't see it. But although it supposedly is the blue of the sky, that's what the ancient Greeks said. The blue of the sky is the color of the ether,
mm,
and it's basically the light. It's the finest grade of air.
mm,
So air sort of separates itself by density. We have the most sort of dense air down here at the Earth level, and then it gets lighter and finer as you get higher up. And hydrogen, when you create hydrogen, it just shoots straight up, right?
mm,
Like hydrogen balloons, are just straight up. And hydrogen, when it's combined with sunlight, produces a blue flame. Or sorry, when hydrogen is burned, it produces a blue flame that's the color of the sky. So yeah, so the blue sky is meant to be a perceptual quality of the ether. So
okay.
it's not totally dark matter.
Yeah. That's amazing, because in meditation, I once asked, what does the spirit dimensions look like, and the answer came back blue. Yeah.
Mm.
So that was interesting what you said there about
Ethereal,
ether.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So ethereal, the word ethereal, which is a fusion of the word ether and real,
Yeah.
it means delicate, heavenly, spiritual air.
Mm.
You know,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Amazing. Truly amazing. Um. Okay. Now we've. Can you believe we've done about an hour already? Um.
Yeah,
I'm.
time flies when you're having fun.
I'm very happy to take a break and come back and do part two. But if you're happy to.